Hi guys, so I'm going to show you how to turn your emoji or your softie pattern, or your design, sorry, into an actual paper pattern that you can use to cut out your pieces of felt. So at the moment you should have a piece of this scrap paper and you've traced your emoji using one of these cardboard circles, which is the actual size your emoji is going to be. And you've drawn your emoji using stencils and rulers and whatever on here, using nice large elements and filling up the space. Okay, I'm just going to add one more thing to this because I want to show you if you've got ears or horns or something like that, I want to show you how to do that. So I'm going to add, even though it doesn't suit this emoji, I'm going to add some horns, and I'm going to use a stencil to help me with this just so that I get a nice neat shape. For each of these pieces, you're going to need to trace a shape. Oh, I'm going to add a tongue. I'll show you why I'm going to add a tongue. So for every piece, you're going to need to trace a shape. So grab some of this lined paper, make sure it's face down, and if you can't see through it too well, it's a good idea to fine line. And if you are going to fine line, and you're fine lining curves or anything that you've done with a stencil, use the same stencil to fine line. If you can see through, you don't need to do the fine lining stage. I'll leave it up to you. Okay, so I'm going to make my paper pieces now. So for each shape here, I need to trace off an individual shape. Now when we put pieces that look like they're next to each other, when we're sewing, we won't actually put the felt next to each other, but one piece will go underneath the other piece. Do you get that? So if I'm doing this mouth here, say that's my mouthpiece, the tongue piece will sit a little bit underneath. So we have to add what's called seam allowance, a little piece that will sit underneath this, okay? And the same for my horns up here. I need to add some seam allowance so that when we sew the horns on, when we tuck them in between the layers, they don't get any smaller. So you just want to add some seam allowance. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to start down in the corner and I'm going to trace the whole shape of the tongue, just using a grey lead. So I'm drawing that bit in, and because I used a stencil for this, I'm going to use the same size stencil so I get a nice neat pattern piece. I'm not going to draw the line through the centre because that's not part of the tongue. I'm just drawing the tongue. Now I'm just going to move this over. You want to try and fit these in. That's not going to quite fit there, so I'm just going to put it up here. And I'm going to very neatly draw this in. Now I don't have the stencils I used for this. I should have these with me, but I'm going to hand draw these. If you've got the actual round containers that you used for these shapes, get them out and draw them in. Now the other thing I'm going to do as I'm doing this is I'm going to write the colour that I want to make these pieces in, okay? So now I know I used, so I'm filling up the paper. I know I used this cup for this, so I'm going to trace that. And that eye is going to be white. I didn't trace the centre bit because that's a separate shape. And in fact, that is so small, that would be really hard to sew on. So I'm actually going to use a button for that. So I'm not going to trace it for this, okay? Now I'm going to do my cross. Now what I didn't do with this was I didn't rule it up. So I'm actually going to rule this using a straight edge to get this nice and tidy. You want to be fairly neat because when you start cutting out of the felt, you may end up getting a little bit messy. And if you start off messy and then you get messier with the felt, it's going to be really messy. So try and keep these ruled up really nicely and really neatly. Is that? So I've done my, oh, that's going to be black. Now I don't need to trace my whole emoji shape because I'm going to supply that for you. So that's your front and your back of your emoji. I've already done that for you, whatever colour you requested. And now I'm going to do my horns. And again, I used a stencil here, so I'm going to use that. Oops. And just for the fun of it, I'm going to have greenhorns. Don't ask me why, but that's what I'm going to have. I'm going to do that one, and I'm going to do this one. Okay, I've left a little bit of space between all my patterns. If you need a second piece of paper, go grab it, because you might have quite a few elements. And I'm going to trace that off. And I've got green in here. Okay, and you've got your original piece here. So I've got everything. I've got my eye. I don't need the centre because I'm going to do that with a button. I've got my tongue, I've got my mouth, and I've got my 2 eyes, and I've got the horns. Okay, so that's what you should, if you haven't got that done today, that's what you need to get done today. Okay, especially if you're away or if you didn't get this quite done last week. Okay, so let's pop those to one side for the moment. The next thing you need to get done today is you should all have now your felt pieces. Let's move these out of the way. Now, I don't know whether I said this in class, but these are the only 2 pieces you are going to get. So you're going to cut them out very, very carefully. Make sure you use a set of the fabric scissors. So these are for right-handed. If you're left-handed, use the big green ones. Okay, these are the left-handed fabric scissors. Okay, so start off, the way we always start off whenever you're cutting out a circle is cut through the middle. Now when I started there, can you see how the fabric is sliding between the blade? That's because I'm not using what I call a power grip on my scissors. Let me just get that into focus. So when you hold your scissors, let me just, I'm actually pulling back with my finger a little bit. I haven't just got them loosely in my hand. I'm doing, you see there, I'm actually pulling back a little bit with my finger. Can you see with this finger? And what that does is it forces the blades together. I don't know if you can hear that sound. And it actually forces the blades together so this cuts a little bit better. And you're going to take your time and cut this very, very slowly. Power grip on the scissors, paying attention, and cutting this as neatly as you can. Don't write your name on these, but you're going to put them straight into your Ziploc bag and seal up your Ziploc bag, because you should have your class, one of your pattern pieces in there with your name on it, so you know which one's yours. Okay, that bit there. If your pieces are fairly decent, they can go into the scrap box. If you've got little tiny bits, just throw them in the rubbish bin, not the recycling bin. Okay, so pop those 2 into your Ziploc bag and make sure you seal it so you don't lose them.